Our next storyteller is a senior lecturer at Tufts University, but a long-time volunteer at one of the newer co-ops in our area, Quabbin Harvest Food Co-op in Orange. Please welcome to the stage, Cathy Stanton.
One of the hardest moments in my involvement with my little local food co-op was the day we had to make a deal with Big Food. So the co-op is in Orange, as Maudie said. It's a little mill town that has lost its mills. It has a lot of empty storefronts in the downtown. It has a lot of people struggling to get by. The co-op had opened in one of those empty storefronts a couple of years before I got involved, and by the time I did, it was also struggling to get by. It was really in the weeds and really just trying to keep the doors open and the lights on. I got involved because after the 2016 US election, I was feeling the need to do something hopeful and productive in my own community. And I thought maybe I could help, so I volunteered to join the board of directors. And I found that people were involved for a whole raft of reasons. So there were people like Carl, who had been a minister and a farmer and a banker and was all about regenerating local economies. There was people like Kelsey, who had just come back from college where she'd gotten very excited about food justice projects. There was Mary Ellen, who was retired from the tech sector and involved in a lot of local projects, and that person who always just jumps in to do whatever has to be done to keep them running. And then there's Julie, who's our store manager, who had a lot of experience in the grocery business and was mostly just really excited about local farms and keeping the local agricultural economy growing. And then there was me. So I'm a writer, I'm a teacher, I'm an anthropologist. I knew next to nothing about the grocery business, but I did know a lot about the food system because I'd spent quite a lot of years studying and thinking and teaching about it. Like a lot of people, I started out wondering, how can this modern industrial food system that is so abundant and so convenient not work for everybody? And I wanted to know, what would it look like to have a food system that did work for everybody? And so here was a chance to actually get my hands on a project within my own community and to do some work on that. And it was hard. It was much, much, much harder than I thought it was going to be. It was really just excruciating to be dealing with this negative cash flow and never having enough money to pay all the bills and kind of get a little bit ahead. What made it possible and even rewarding was, first of all, doing it with so many other good people, with so much heart and passion for the project and so many different kinds of skills and knowledge and experiences. But it also helped that my somewhat nerdy study of the food system turned out to be really useful, at least for me, because it gave me this really broader view of what was going on. And I knew enough to know that you don't have to talk very long about food before you're talking about all kinds of other things that have to do with big questions around social class and race and place and belonging and land and environment and capitalism and climate change and all of those things. And that it felt useful often to open up space for those discussions in the midst of all the day-to-day grind that we were dealing with. Just because it reminded us and told me like why this was so hard. It wasn't just that, that this particular store was struggling, but that it's just really hard to make an alternative. And that it didn't mean we were incompetent or hapless or naive. We were naive, but it was like naive in all the right ways, right? And it showed us that we were doing something that was very possibly crazy, but also really important and quite brave. And I felt like I could really bring my entire self to this in a way that I have not had a chance to do with anything else in my life. I was sort of firing on all my cylinders and able to use all my experience and who I was, kind of emotionally and socially and politically and intellectually. And strangely, that did feel good. Until the day we had to sit down with Big Food, when Big Food was mad at us. So Big Food in this case is a giant corporation that had been bringing us rolled oats and olive oil and other non-local groceries that our core shoppers had told us they wanted to see in the store if they were going to shop there at all. So they'd been bringing us a delivery every week. But a couple of years into my involvement, we had hit a patch where we weren't paying them every week because for whatever reason, they weren't demanding it. And we were in this position where literally the only things we could pay were what we absolutely had to. So the bills were piling up. And Carl, who was the treasurer, was sounding the alarm and saying, you know, there's going to come a day when they're going to demand that money, and that's going to be a problem for us because, first of all, we couldn't pay it. It was well into 5 figures at that point. But also, they were probably going to cut us off and not bring us those groceries that we needed if we wanted to keep those core shoppers shopping. And that if that happened, there was this danger point because it might mean that we'd be sliding down that slippery slope we'd been kind of clinging to the top edges of. And inevitably, that day came. So that's how I found myself with the rest of the finance team, Carl, Kelsey, Mary Ellen, Julie, upstairs in our meeting room, kind of huddled around one corner of a big meeting table around somebody's phone. And out of the phone is coming this very unfriendly, implacable voice of the regional sales manager who was just telling us very plainly there was no room for negotiation. She had heard all of the sad stories, and she was not interested in hearing any more about ours. There was not going to be a payment plan option. There was no other outcome except that we either paid all the money right away, or we wouldn't get any more groceries, which would be that danger point for us. And I just felt like we were talking to a brick wall. There was like a huge divide. And I was on the right side of it, and all these people that I loved and admired were on the right side of it doing the right thing. But it was very tall. And even though I was bringing my whole self to it, my whole self just felt pretty short in that moment. And I couldn't see a way to get across it. And then Carl found a way. He just started talking, and he started telling the woman about Orange. He started describing the empty storefronts and the numbers of people who were on SNAP, the food assistance. He told her about the mission of the co-op, which was to be a resource for everybody in the community. And he mentioned that in the first year of the state's Healthy Incentives Program, which gets fresh fruits and vegetables to people who are on SNAP, our little store was actually the top enroller in the entire state. Yeah. So he told her all that, and then he just stopped and waited, and we all waited. And there was a long silence. And then out of the phone came this sigh. And then the woman said in a really different voice, she said, you know, it's just not right that there are so many people who can't get enough food, and you're doing a wonderful thing in trying to help. And then we went on and had quite a different conversation, and she did offer a payment plan, which wasn't a perfect plan, but it helped us buy a little time. It got us a little further out of the weeds. It was one of the turning points to get out of that bare survival mode, and which is to where we are now. And it was a turning point for me, too, because it made it clear to me that it's not a big secret that the mainstream food system doesn't work for everybody. It's not a secret to most people that there's something profoundly wrong with that. And it confirmed my sense that there's something profoundly right in being willing to take up a piece of the struggle to make something better. And it showed me that even big food, if you could get it in the right mood, has to admit that too. Thank you.
Cathy Stanton.